The Xeris homeworld once thrived as one of the galaxy's most advanced civilizations. Its cities reached for the skies, built with technology far beyond what the galaxy had ever seen. The Xeris were known as peaceful and wise, always striving to help other species and share their knowledge. But now, the planet was nothing more than a dying husk. The cities were abandoned, their towers crumbling, and their once vibrant fields now lay bare under a gray sky. The galaxy had forgotten the Xeris. Their decline had been slow, unnoticed by those who had once called them allies. The great empire of the Xeris was no more. Captain Erin stood on the deck of the Hopebringer, a small human vessel, gazing at the planet below. It was a barren world, its surface scorched by war and neglect. She had heard the stories, how the galaxy's councils had declared the Xeris an unnecessary burden. The powerful fleets of the galaxy had turned their backs, deeming them weak and insignificant. The Xeris were abandoned to die, left with no resources, no allies, and no hope. But Erin couldn't accept that. She had joined the military because she believed in something more than just the survival of the strongest. Humanity, despite all its flaws, had always been a beacon of hope for others. Now, Erin's mission was clear: to rescue what remained of the Xeris and to give them a chance at survival. No one else was coming. Humanity was the last hope they had. As the Hopebringer descended through the atmosphere, Erin's crew prepared for what was to come. The crew members were a mix of soldiers, engineers, and doctors, all volunteers. They were risking everything to help the Xeris, even though the galaxy had long since written them off. The crew knew the mission would be dangerous. The planet was crawling with scavengers, alien raiders who took advantage of the planet's fall. They didn't care about the Xeris. They only wanted the planet's remaining resources. But for Erin, this mission was personal. She remembered her father's stories about the Xeris. He had been a historian, and he spoke of their wisdom, their kindness, and their incredible knowledge. He had taught her that the value of a species wasn't measured by how many planets they controlled or how many battles they won, but by the lives they touched. That was why she had joined the military, not for glory, but to help those who needed it. "Captain, we've made it," said Lieutenant Haley, her voice crackling over the intercom. Erin snapped out of her thoughts and looked at the monitor. The ruins of the Xeris capital city came into view. It was eerily quiet, the once bustling metropolis now just a memory. "Prepare to land. Let's see what we can salvage," Erin said, her voice steady but determined. She knew that this was only the beginning. The Xeris had been abandoned by everyone else, but they weren't going to be left behind on her watch. As the Hopebringer touched down on the barren land, Erin gathered her team. They were about to step onto a planet that had been forgotten by the galaxy, a place where hope had long since died. But for Erin and her crew, the fight for survival had only just begun. The crew of the Hopebringer disembarked from the ship and stepped onto the desolate surface of the Xeris homeworld. The air was dry, with the faint scent of something burned and ancient hanging in the wind. The sky, once a brilliant shade of blue, was now a dull gray, casting an eerie light over the lifeless landscape. Every step they took seemed to echo, the silence too heavy, too real. Captain Erin surveyed the scene before her. The city ruins stretched out as far as the eye could see. Cracked roads, toppled buildings, and statues of long-forgotten heroes. Once, this planet had been a beacon of peace and knowledge, and now it was a shadow of its former self. "All right, team," Erin called to her crew, her voice strong and determined. "Let's make it quick. We need to locate any survivors and secure supplies. We don't know what we're dealing with here." Lieutenant Haley, the ship's second-in-command, nodded. "Understood, Captain. We'll check the ruins for any sign of life." The team split into smaller groups, each member armed and ready. They were here to help, but they knew the dangers of this mission. The Xeris world wasn't just abandoned. It was being picked apart by hostile forces. Raiders, scavengers, and mercenaries had taken advantage of the Xeris fall. The galaxy had given up on this world, and now it was a lawless place, filled with those who had no respect for the lives that remained. As Erin and her team ventured deeper into the ruins, they found signs of life. Not many, but enough to give them hope. Small groups of Saris survivors had taken refuge in the remnants of underground bunkers, hidden away from the raiders above. Their faces were gaunt, their clothes tattered. They had been surviving on scraps for months, possibly even years. The once proud species had been brought to their knees, and it was clear they didn't trust outsiders. Erin met one of the survivors, a young Saris woman named Talus, who looked no older than 18. Her skin was pale, her eyes filled with sorrow, but there was fire in her gaze. She had seen too much, lived through too much to simply give up. "Who are you?" Talus asked, her voice cautious but curious. "We're here to help," Erin said, offering a reassuring smile. "We came to save you. We know the galaxy turned its back on you, but we're not leaving until we get you to safety." Talus stared at her, disbelief in her eyes. "The galaxy left us to die," she whispered. "Why would you risk your lives for us?" "Because that's what humans do," Erin replied. "We fight for the ones no one else will. You're not alone anymore." Talus seemed to consider this for a moment before nodding slowly. "We've been abandoned. There is no one left to fight for us." "Not true," Erin said firmly. "We're here now." The sound of movement interrupted their conversation. Erin's eyes sharpened as a small group of armed raiders appeared from behind a ruined structure. They were alien mercenaries, scavengers looking for easy pickings. They hadn't expected to find anyone alive, let alone a human ship on the surface. "Get down," Erin shouted to her team, pulling her weapon from its holster. A firefight broke out instantly, the air filled with the sharp sound of blaster fire and the whizzing of energy bolts. The humans and Saris fought side by side, their desperation fueling them. Erin moved with purpose, her training kicking in as she took down one of the raiders. Her crew worked together seamlessly, backing each other up. The raiders, caught off guard by the resistance, quickly realized they were no match for the humans. As the last raider fell, silence returned to the city, but it was different this time. It wasn't just the quiet of abandonment, it was the quiet of new beginnings. "We're going to need more help," Erin said, breathing heavily, her eyes scanning the area for any more threats. "But we've made our point. The Xaris aren't alone anymore." Talus looked at her with newfound respect. "You're serious," she said, the doubt fading from her voice. "Maybe there is hope after all." And with that, Erin knew this mission was far from over. It had just begun. As the days passed, the Hopebringer and its crew worked tirelessly alongside the Xaris survivors, building trust and securing their position on the planet. Captain Erin had hoped for a smooth operation, but the reality was far from simple. The Xaris had been betrayed by their own allies, abandoned when they needed help the most, and the scars of that betrayal ran deep. Trust didn't come easy. Erin and Lieutenant Haley spent hours with the Xaris, gathering what little information they could about the remaining factions that roamed the planet. It was clear the raiders weren't the only threat. Many of the surviving Xaris had been forced to retreat to hidden bunkers, fearing not just the hostile forces, but the betrayal of their own people. They had once been part of a great alliance, but now they had nowhere to turn. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Talus approached Erin with a solemn expression. "I've heard rumors," Talus said quietly, glancing around as if to make sure no one else was listening. "There's another group of Xaris, but they're not like us. They've been working with the raiders. They've sided with the scavengers." Erin's brow furrowed. "Traitors?" she asked, though the word felt too light for the betrayal that had taken place. "Not exactly," Talus replied. "They've been desperate. They want to survive, no matter the cost. But they've done things that make even the raiders look honorable. They've given up everything for power." Erin knew what that meant. Power was a dangerous thing, especially in the wrong hands. If these Saras had turned against their own people, they would be just as dangerous as the raiders, and maybe even more so. They had knowledge of Saras technology, and that could turn the tide in the fight for this planet. We'll need to find them before they find us, Erin said, determination in her voice. But we can't do it alone. We need allies. The next morning, Erin called a meeting with her crew. We've made a lot of progress, but there's a new danger we have to face. There are Xaris traitors among us, working with the raiders. They're hiding somewhere on the planet, and we need to track them down before they can do any more damage. Ailey spoke up, her voice steady. Do we have any idea where they might be? Talus nodded. I know where they are. They've set up camp near the old mining facilities. It's a place they can hide, and it's where they've been taking their stolen technology. Erin looked at her crew, their faces a mix of concern and resolve. They had come here to help, but now they faced an even greater challenge. The fate of the Xaris rested in their hands, and if they couldn't find these traitors, it could mean the end for both the humans and the Xaris. We'll move out at dawn, Erin said. We'll need to be quick and silent. If they see us coming, we'll lose our chance. The crew prepared for the dangerous mission, knowing that every step could bring them closer to the enemy, and that their survival depended on the strength of their alliance with the Xaris. As the night fell, Erin stood at the edge of the camp, looking out into the darkness. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming. The Xaris had been abandoned by the galaxy, but humanity would not leave them behind. She made a promise to herself, to her crew, and to the Xaris. They would fight until the end, no matter what. The fight for survival was just beginning. The next morning, the crew of the Hopebringer set off on their mission to find the traitors. The old mining facilities were miles away from their current camp, hidden deep in the planet's desolate landscape. The journey was treacherous, with jagged rocks and shifting sand making it difficult to keep their footing. Every step felt like a race against time. They knew the traitors were close, and they couldn't afford to be discovered. Erin led the group, her sharp eyes scanning the horizon. She had always been a careful leader, planning every detail, but this mission was different. They weren't just hunting for enemies. They were racing to save an entire species from extinction. As they approached the mining site, Talus's face grew grim. This is where they've been hiding, she said softly. We have to be careful. They've turned this place into a fortress. If we're not careful, we'll be walking into a trap. The team slowed down, their steps quiet as they neared the entrance. The facility was vast, its walls covered in rust and debris. The remnants of the Xaris' once great technology lay scattered around the site. But it wasn't just the facility that worried Erin. It was the knowledge hidden within these walls. What are they doing here? Haley asked, her voice barely a whisper. Talus hesitated for a moment before answering. They're looking for something. I don't know exactly what, but I've seen them come back with pieces of technology, ancient Xaris relics. They're trying to use it to regain control of their power. But these artifacts, they're dangerous. If they get their hands on the wrong one, it could destroy everything. Erin's mind raced. The Xaris were once the most advanced civilization in the galaxy. Their technology was powerful, far beyond anything humanity had seen. If these traitors had discovered something too dangerous, they might not only threaten the Xaris' survival but the entire galaxy. We can't let them get hold of any more of that tech, Erin said, her voice firm. We need to get inside, find out what they're doing, and stop them before it's too late. The group reached the entrance of the facility, a large, metal door that was half buried under sand and rubble. Erin gestured for the team to stay close as they carefully pried the door open. Inside, the air was thick with dust, and the sounds of clanking machinery echoed in the vast empty space. The traitors had turned the facility into a makeshift base, using the remnants of Xaris technology to power their equipment. Spread out, Erin ordered. Look for any sign of their plans. We need to know what they're after. The team moved through the facility, searching for clues. Erin and Haley made their way to the control room, where old Ceres consoles flickered with life, displaying incomprehensible symbols and data. It was clear that the traders were using these ancient systems to access something hidden deep within the facility. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed through the room as a group of Ceres traders appeared from behind the shadows, armed with weapons salvaged from the ruins. "It's over, Captain," one of them sneered, stepping forward. "You should have stayed out of this. This planet is ours now." Erin's eyes narrowed, her heart pounding. The confrontation had come sooner than expected, but she wasn't backing down. "We're not here for your planet," she said, her voice steady. "We're here to stop you from destroying it." The traders laughed, but the tension in the room was palpable. Erin knew the fight wasn't just about weapons. It was about the future of the Ceres. They had the knowledge, but they lacked the wisdom to use it. Humanity couldn't let them make the same mistakes that had led to their downfall. With no more words needed, the battle began. Erin's team was quick and efficient, but the traders were desperate, their minds clouded by their lust for power. The fight was fierce, but in the end, it was clear that the traders were outmatched. As the last of the traders were taken into custody, Erin stood before the damaged control room, looking at the strange, ancient technology. The Ceres knowledge was both a gift and a curse, and she knew that it had to be handled with care. "This is just the beginning," Erin muttered to herself. "We have to make sure this never happens again." As her crew secured the site, Erin couldn't shake the feeling that they had only scratched the surface of what lay beneath the ruins of the Ceres civilization. There were still many secrets to uncover, and many dangers to face. But one thing was clear: humanity was here to stay, and they would fight for the survival of the Ceres. The battle at the mining facility had left the crew of the Hopebringer battered but victorious. The traders were in custody, but Erin knew this victory was only temporary. They had stopped the immediate threat, but the bigger challenge remained. The galaxy still saw the Ceres as expendable, and unless they could find a way to protect them, their survival was far from guaranteed. The Hopebringer crew returned to their camp, which was now surrounded by the remains of the planet's once thriving ecosystem. The silence weighed on them as they stood together, thinking about what had just happened. The mission was becoming more dangerous by the day, and with every step they took, the stakes grew higher. "We've got a serious problem," Erin said to her crew as they gathered around the command table in the ship. "We've secured the traders, but we've barely scratched the surface of what they're planning. They were looking for something ancient, and whatever it is, they're willing to do anything to get their hands on it. We need to find it before they do," Haley replied, her voice grim. "But where do we even start?" Erin paused, thinking. The Ceres had been a powerful species, their technology vast and intricate. The ancient knowledge they had hidden away on this planet could be either their salvation or their doom. And it was clear the traders were willing to destroy whatever was left of their world to take control of that power. "The only way to stop them is to get to the Ceres' most important relic," Erin said slowly. "The one thing that could give them back their power. The problem is, it's in a place even the Ceres didn't dare enter. A place buried deep beneath this planet." "The abyss," Talus whispered. Her voice trembled with fear. "It's a forbidden place. The Ancient Ones sealed it away because of what's inside." Erin turned to the young Ceres woman. "What's inside? What do you mean?" Talus hesitated, her eyes filled with both fear and sorrow. "It's an artifact. The Ceres call it the Heart of the Stars. It's said to hold the power to change everything. Whoever controls it controls the fate of the entire galaxy. The ancient Ceres sealed it away because they feared its power. But if those traitors find it, they'll use it to destroy everything we've worked to build." Erin felt a cold shiver run down her spine. If the traitors got their hands on the Heart of the Stars, they could bring down not only the Ceres, but every civilization that had turned against them. It was too dangerous to leave in the wrong hands. "We can't let that happen," Erin said, determination in her voice. "We have to find it first." before they do. And we'll need help. The Xaris can't do this alone. We're going to need more than just our crew to pull this off." The crew exchanged glances. They knew the risks. They knew how dangerous this mission was. But they also knew that if they didn't act now, it could mean the end for the Xaris and perhaps the entire galaxy. "We'll do whatever it takes, Captain," Haley said, her voice unwavering. Erin nodded. "We have no choice. We have to get to the heart of the stars before they do. It's a desperate gamble, but it's the only chance we have." The plan was simple, but the risks were immense. The heart of the stars was buried deep beneath the planet's surface, hidden in a labyrinth of ancient Xaris temples and forgotten tombs. No one had ever been inside, and no one knew exactly what lay ahead. But they had no other option. "We leave at first light," Erin ordered. "Get everything ready. This could be our final mission, and we have no room for mistakes." As the crew prepared for their dangerous journey, Erin stood alone on the ship's deck, staring out at the barren landscape. The weight of what they were about to do pressed heavily on her, but there was no turning back now. They were humanity's last hope, and they had to save the Xaris or watch the galaxy burn. With one last deep breath, Erin turned and entered the ship. The countdown to the unknown had begun. The Hopebringer lifted off the surface of the Xaris' dying world, its engines humming with quiet determination. As the ship soared into the dark void of space, Captain Erin couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. They had no idea how much time they had before the traitors would track them down, or worse, how quickly the galaxy's powerful fleet would respond to their defiance. "We're heading into dangerous territory, Captain," Haley said, her voice tense as she monitored the ship's systems. "I've been getting strange readings. It's almost as if someone's tracking us." Erin frowned. She had suspected as much. The galaxy's powerful councils had long since abandoned the Xaris, but they didn't give up that easily. No one left behind was truly forgotten. The Xaris' ancient technology, the heart of the stars, was far too valuable to be ignored. If the galaxy knew it was at risk of falling into the wrong hands, they would act quickly to stop it. "You think the fleet's onto us?" Erin asked, turning to Haley. "I wouldn't be surprised," Haley replied, her fingers flying over the console. "We're far from the only ship in the galaxy, and our little operation hasn't exactly been a secret. Someone will notice if we're too bold." Erin's mind raced. They were now on a mission that could change everything: the fate of the Xaris, the heart of the stars, and perhaps the entire galaxy. But if the galaxy's leaders found out what they were doing, there would be no way to stop them. She could already picture Admiral Jarek's cold face. The Admiral was known for his ruthlessness, and his loyalty to the councils ran deep. He wouldn't hesitate to destroy everything in their path if it meant protecting galactic interests. "Captain, I'm detecting a fleet of ships approaching," Haley said suddenly, her voice sharp. "It's the Admiral's fleet. They'd found us." Erin's stomach sank. She had hoped to stay under the radar for just a little longer. But now, with the galaxy's fleet closing in, time was running out. "Can we outrun them?" Erin asked, her eyes narrowing as she looked out of the viewport at the stars ahead. "It's not about outrunning them, Captain," Haley replied. "They're too fast, and they're too powerful. If we try to run, we'll be caught within minutes." Erin clenched her fists. This was it. The fight for the Xaris' survival wasn't just about the traitors anymore. It was about the entire galaxy, and the galaxy wasn't going to let them win without a fight. "We won't run," Erin said, her voice steady. "We'll face them head on. We have the element of surprise. We've come too far to back down now." The crew gathered in the briefing room, their faces determined. They knew what was coming, and they knew the odds were stacked against them. But they also knew they couldn't let the Xaris fall into the hands of the galaxy's cold, calculating leaders. "We need to stall them," Erin said. "We need to give the Xaris a chance to reach the heart of the stars before they can stop us. Our mission hasn't changed. We fight, we protect, and we win." The tension was thick in the room as everyone prepared for the inevitable confrontation. They were outgunned, outnumbered, and vastly underpowered compared to the fleet that was closing in on them. But there was something the Admiral and the rest of the galaxy's leaders didn't understand. Humanity had always been underestimated, and that was about to change. As the Hopebringer prepared to face the incoming fleet, Erin couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. Her crew wasn't just fighting for the Xeris. They were fighting for something bigger, a chance to prove that no one, not even the galaxy's most powerful fleets, could stand in humanity's way when it came to doing what was right. "Prepare for battle," Erin ordered, her voice resolute. "We fight for the Xeris. We fight for our future." With that, the crew of the Hopebringer braced for the battle ahead, knowing that their mission was no longer just about survival. It was about defying the galaxy's expectations and showing the universe that humanity would always stand tall, no matter the odds. The Hopebringer moved swiftly through the blackness of space, its engines humming quietly as it flew towards the hidden location of the heart of the stars. Captain Erin stood at the command center, her eyes focused on the navigation screen, but her thoughts were far from the stars. The galaxy was closing in on them, and every moment counted. The fleet led by Admiral Jarek was not far behind. If they didn't reach the heart before the Admiral's forces arrived, everything they had worked for would be lost. "We're almost there," Haley's voice broke through Erin's thoughts. "We've entered the coordinates, and it's just up ahead. But we can't afford to be slow. They'll be here in less than an hour." Erin nodded, her jaw set firmly. The planet where the heart was hidden was small, not even charted on most maps, and nearly impossible to find. But Erin and her crew had uncovered its location thanks to the clues they had gathered on the Xeris ancient tech. It was a place lost to history, a final sanctuary meant to protect the most powerful artifact that Xeris had ever created. "We'll land, retrieve the heart, and get out," Erin ordered. "We don't have the time to waste." The ship descended through the thick atmosphere, and the crew braced for the turbulence that followed. The land below was a mix of rugged mountains and thick forests, untouched by any civilization for centuries. Erin knew they were running out of time. The Admiral's fleet wasn't going to stop until they found them, and if they didn't retrieve the heart soon, they would be trapped. As the Hopebringer touched down in a clearing, Erin quickly gathered her team. "Move out," she said, her voice steady, but urgency in her eyes. "We need to reach the temple before they get here. Everyone stick together." The crew moved quickly, their boots crunching through the dry leaves and twigs. The ancient ruins of the Xeris temple rose before them, dark and imposing. The structure was unlike anything Erin had ever seen. It was built from a black stone that seemed to absorb the light, and strange symbols covered the walls, glowing faintly. The air felt charged with power, as if the ground beneath their feet was alive with energy. "We're here," Talis said, her voice reverent as she looked up at the entrance. "This is the heart's resting place. But this is no ordinary temple. The Xeris built this place to guard it. We'll have to prove ourselves worthy to enter." Erin took a deep breath, her hand on her blaster. She knew there would be obstacles, but she wasn't backing down. Not now. "We'll face whatever challenges come," Erin said, her eyes scanning the temple's entrance. "We don't have time for anything else." The crew stepped forward, and as they approached the entrance, the stone doors slowly began to open. The air inside was thick with ancient power, and a low hum echoed through the chamber. At the center of the vast hall stood a pedestal, bathed in soft light, upon which lay the heart of the stars. It was a crystal, larger than any Erin had ever seen, pulsing with a light that seemed to come from deep within. But before they could move toward it, a sound echoed through the chamber, the heavy footfalls of the traders. They had followed them. The time for subtlety was over. "We can't let them take it," Haley shouted as the traders, armed and desperate, stormed into the temple. The conflict was inevitable. The traders had one goal, the heart of the stars, and they would stop at nothing to claim it. Erin's heart raced as she turned to her team. Defend the heart. Keep them away. The Hopebringer crew sprang into action. Blasters fired, and the temple's once quiet chambers filled with the chaos of battle. Erin fought with everything she had, moving quickly and decisively. The traitors were fierce, but her team was more determined. They would not let the Xeris fate fall into the hands of those who had already betrayed them. As the battle raged on, Erin's eyes never left the heart. It was within reach, but so was danger. The traitors were relentless, but Erin knew she couldn't let them win, not after everything they had been through. The fate of the galaxy, the Xeris, and humanity rested on this one moment. And no matter what happened, Erin was determined to see this through to the end. The chaos inside the ancient temple was unlike anything Erin had ever experienced. Blaster fire echoed through the vast, dark chambers, lighting up the walls with each pulse. The traitors were relentless, their eyes filled with desperation as they charged toward the pedestal that held the heart of the stars. Erin and her crew were doing everything they could to keep them back, but the battle was fierce, and time was running out. "Move!" Erin shouted to her team as she ducked behind a pillar, narrowly avoiding a blast. The traitors were coming from all sides now, and they had no intention of giving up. They needed to reach the heart before the traitors did, or all would be lost. Haley fired her blaster with deadly accuracy, hitting one of the traitors square in the chest. The man dropped to the ground with a thud, but more kept coming. "We need to hold them off, Captain. They're too many." Erin glanced at the pedestal, her eyes locking onto the heart. It was so close now. The glowing crystal pulsed with an otherworldly energy, a promise of power unlike anything they had ever seen. But it was also a curse, a power that could destroy everything if it fell into the wrong hands. She couldn't let the traitors win. Not now. "Keep them back," Erin shouted, turning to Talis. The young Xeris woman had been silent throughout most of the fight, but now she stepped forward, her expression fierce and determined. She raised her hand and muttered a word in the ancient Xeris language. The ground beneath their feet rumbled as the stone doors of the temple slammed shut, trapping the traitors inside. "That should buy us some time," Talis said, her voice shaky but resolute. "But not much." Erin nodded, then turned her attention back to the pedestal. She could see the traitors trying to force their way through the door, but they were running out of options. She had to act now. Erin sprinted across the room, her boots echoing in the silence. She could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on her. The heart of the stars was so close, yet she knew that touching it would come with its own set of dangers. The Xeris had locked it away for a reason, and even with all their knowledge, they had never dared to unleash its full power. "Captain, wait." Talis cried out, but it was too late. Erin reached the pedestal, her heart pounding in her chest. As her fingers brushed the surface of the heart, a strange warmth surged through her body. The crystal hummed, its light intensifying as if it were alive. Erin pulled her hand back, gasping. Something had shifted, something had awakened. The power of the heart was like nothing she had ever felt before. She could feel its pull, its power calling to her. It was both terrifying and intoxicating. "You've touched it now," Talis whispered, her voice full of fear. "The heart cannot be controlled by just anyone. It demands sacrifice." Erin's gaze was fixed on the glowing crystal. She didn't know what had just happened, but she knew one thing for sure. The heart of the stars was more powerful than she had ever imagined. And now it was up to her to control it, before the traitors and the galaxy did. As the doors of the temple began to shake under the traitors' assault, Erin made a decision. "We're leaving. Now." She grabbed the heart and turned to face her team. The traitors were still trapped behind the doors, but their time was running out. They had to move quickly. The future of the Xeris, and perhaps the galaxy, depended on their ability to get out of the temple alive. "Let's go," Erin said, her voice firm. She held the heart in her hands, and though the power it contained made her feel like a different person, she knew she couldn't let it control her. The power was hers to wield, but only if she remained in control. With the heart in her grasp, Erin led her team out of the temple and back to the Hopebringer. The battle for the Xeris future wasn't over. It had only just begun, and no matter what came next, she would fight for it. The Hopebringer raced through space, its engines roaring as it fled from the chaos that had unfolded on the surface of the Xeris planet. Erin stood at the command center, the heart of the stars carefully secured beside her. Her mind raced, but her body was numb. They had the heart, but at what cost? The battle had been brutal. The traitors had been defeated, and the Xeris legacy was safe for now. But the conflict with the galaxy's fleet was far from over. Admiral Jarek's forces were closing in, their ships fast and powerful. The human crew had managed to buy some time by fleeing to the depths of space, but they couldn't run forever. "We're on the edge of the galaxy, Captain," Haley said, her voice tight with concern. "The fleet's still tracking us. We can't outrun them much longer." Erin turned to face her. "We're not outrunning them. We'll fight." The decision had been made. There was no going back. With the heart of the stars in their possession, they had the power to stand up to the galaxy's might, but that power came with a heavy responsibility. Erin knew she couldn't use the heart recklessly. It was a force unlike any other. If the heart's energy was unleashed too soon, it could bring destruction, not salvation. "We need a plan," Erin said, pacing. "The fleet will be upon us soon, and we need to hold them off long enough to get the Xeris to safety." Haley nodded. "We don't have the firepower to take them head-on. If we engage them directly, we'll be wiped out before we even get a chance to use the heart." Erin stopped pacing and turned to the others in the room. "Then we make a sacrifice," she said, her voice steady, though the weight of the words hung heavy in the air. "We'll use the heart's power to disable the fleet's engines," Erin continued. "If we can't outrun them, we'll slow them down long enough to get the Xeris to safety, but it'll come at a cost." "Captain, are you sure about this?" Haley asked, her eyes filled with concern. "The heart's energy is dangerous. We don't know what it will do to the ship or to us." Erin took a deep breath. She had been wrestling with the decision ever since they'd left the temple. Using the heart meant risking everything: the lives of her crew, the safety of the Xeris, and even the future of humanity. But it was the only choice they had left. "I'm sure," Erin said, her voice unwavering. "This is the only way we stand a chance. We have to protect the Xeris. We've already made it this far, and we can't turn back now." The crew exchanged uncertain glances, but they all knew there was no other way. The mission had always been about more than just survival. It had been about protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. Haley finally nodded. "Then we're with you, Captain. Whatever it takes." Erin turned back to the heart, its soft glow casting a strange light on her face. She reached out and placed her hands gently on the crystal. The power it held was undeniable, and for a brief moment, she felt its call, an overwhelming rush of energy that filled her mind and heart. It was a power unlike any other, and Erin knew, deep down, that to use it would mean a sacrifice. The heart demanded it. It was not just a tool, it was a force of nature, and those who wielded it would be forever changed. "We'll make the sacrifice," Erin whispered to herself, her fingers tightening around the crystal. "For the Xeris, for humanity." The room fell silent as Erin began the ritual, using the heart's energy to focus their power into the ship's weapon systems. She could feel the strain it placed on her body, the heat rising as the energy surged through her. The ship's systems hummed, vibrating under the intensity of the heart's power. "We're ready," Erin said, her voice strained, but resolute. "Engage." With a blinding flash of light, the Hopebringer unleashed the heart's power on Admiral Jarek's fleet. The enemy ships faltered, their engines momentarily disabled. It wasn't enough to destroy them, but it was enough to give the Hopebringer a head start. The sacrifice had been made, and the course was set. They had bought themselves some time. Now it was up to the crew of the Hopebringer to escape the grasp of the galaxy's forces, with the Xeris future still hanging in the balance. Erin took one last look at the heart before she turned to face her crew. There was no turning back now. The real fight had only just begun. The Hopebringer sailed through the vast expanse of space, its engines humming with quiet power. Erin stood on the bridge, her eyes fixed on the stars ahead. The fleet that had once hunted them down was now far behind, its engines disabled by the power of the heart of the stars. But the victory was bittersweet. They had made it this far, but the galaxy's true response was yet to come. The Xeris were safe, for now. The Hopebringer had found a hidden world, far from the reach of the galaxy's leaders, where the Xeris could rebuild and live in peace. But Erin knew that this peace was fragile. The galaxy would not forget the Xeris, and they would not forget what humanity had done. Erin looked over at the crew, their faces tired but filled with determination. They had come a long way since they had first set foot on the Xeris' dying world. They had faced battles, betrayal, and the weight of impossible choices. But through it all, they had stood together. "We've done it," Erin said, her voice steady, though she felt the weight of their journey pressing on her shoulders. "The Xeris have a chance to rebuild, but our fight isn't over." Haley nodded, her face showing the same resolve. "The galaxy's leaders won't let this go. They'll be watching us, waiting for the moment to strike. But we've shown them that humanity will fight for what's right," Erin replied. "We've proven that we won't back down, no matter the odds." The crew fell silent, each of them reflecting on what had happened. They had defied the odds, taken on impossible risks, and emerged victorious. But the cost had been high. They had used the heart of the stars, and in doing so, had unleashed a power that no one fully understood. The heart had changed them all, in ways they couldn't yet grasp. "We've given the Xeris a future," Erin said, her eyes moving to Talus, who stood quietly nearby. The young Xeris woman had become an ally, a leader in her own right. She had seen her people brought to the brink of extinction, and now, with humanity's help, she had a chance to lead them into a new era. Talus stepped forward, her expression filled with gratitude. "Thank you, Captain. You and your crew gave us hope when no one else would. The Xeris will never forget what you've done." Erin nodded, her heart swelling with pride. "We didn't do it alone. We fought together. And that's how we'll continue to fight, side by side, for what's right." As the Hopebringer drifted toward its new home, Erin took a moment to look at the stars. The universe was vast, full of danger and uncertainty, but it was also full of possibility. The Xeris had been forgotten by the galaxy, abandoned to their fate. But humanity had shown them that no one was truly alone, not while they had the strength to fight. "We've changed the future," Erin said softly, more to herself than to anyone else, "and we'll keep fighting for it, no matter what." As the ship approached the hidden world, Erin's thoughts turned to the future. The galaxy might never understand the choices they had made, but she knew one thing for sure. Humanity would always stand for those who needed it most. The Hopebringer had completed its mission, but the story was far from over. In a universe full of uncertainty, humanity had proven that even in the darkest times, there was always hope. And as long as they stood together, they would face whatever came next, united, strong, and ready for whatever the stars had in store.